never know if it could change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong or right. You never know.
So how do you want to do this?
How do I want to do this?
How do you want to do this?
Listen, Morty, you come to a corner, you see to your left is a reinforced wooden door.
I still want to do our Rick and Morty thing, but
All right, we'll
I'm
have
not
to do
feeling
that.
it today because
Okay.
did you see what Kanye tweeted?
No. What? Not...
He tweeted that he loves Rick and Morty.
Oh. Kanye West and Elon Musk, two brain geniuses who love
geniuses, Galaxy
Rick and
Brain
Morty.
Bros.
Anyway, it's Dungeon Master of None, right?
It is Dungeon Master of None. Hello.
I'm Ron Burgundy.
I'm Ron Burgundy. Yeah, I'm Rob.
I'm Matt.
And we got a lot of things going on, as you just heard us talking about. There's some Rick and Morty news, but this is not a Rick and Morty podcast, so we're not going to be talking.
Oh, thank God!
Dear
hey,
God.
what's up?
Hey,
it's Rick and Morty
it's
talk.
Rick and Morty
I'm
cast.
Matt, aka Rick Matt, and I'm Matt Steve143, and this is Rob Steve145.
Yeah,
I don't
right.
know. That's probably like a Rick and Morty joke.
It sounds like a Rick and Morty joke. We're alternate universe, Rob and Matt. Anyway.
It's a glibglorp. I don't know how they come up with these funny names. It's like they're making fun of alien names.
Almost as if they're making it up as they go along. And they repeatedly highlight that in the show. Anyway, what actually are we going to talk about, Matt?
Yeah, we've got a unwanted advice episode where
that's right.
we answer the questions you didn't ask about your Dungeons and Dragons or role-playing games. Stick around for that.
I should point out that we're getting a lot of actual wanted questions. Are we going to be having any of those today, Matt, or are they all unwanted?
No wanted questions, but we do have a follow-up. Cue that follow-up music. So if you listen to our last...
Let's hold off on that follow-up. Let's
okay.
do...
All right, follow-up
let's talk
later.
a little of happenings. What's the haps on the wire, on the D&D news train? Anything interesting?
So next week, or probably this week when you're listening to it, a new book for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition comes out, Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. I believe I've gone to two of my local gaming stores to try and get it at the earlier availability. One of them...
That's the 18th,
said
right?
Maybe? Yeah, so it's May 18th.
Yeah, I have one reserved for the 18th.
Old Nan's Comics and Games said, oh, well, who knows when we'll get it in.
Yeah, that's
because they're that kind of store.
I have a big, fancy, high-end warehouse type store here, Guardian Games. I love it. There are other good stores here, but Guardian is the one that I can count on to have Mordenkainen's in on time. So
Nan's may not have Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes in on time, but they'll always have a really dusty and beer-stained book from who knows when. I found a BattleTech book from at least 1993 that I bought for. Is this
a
$10.
Store with the Earth Dawn books?
Yes, as the Earth Dawn books, one of the managers there has an art car, a car that looks like a giant Santa Claus hat.
Wow.
He also looks like Santa Claus.
Does
it's a pretty cool
go to
place.
Burning Man with his Santa Claus car?
No, he goes to the Houston Art Car Parade.
Oh, right.
Which is a dumb thing here in Houston.
Yep.
That's cool.
Anyway. So Mordenkainen's is coming up. As we mentioned on our previous podcast, there's been a bunch of teasers on other podcasts and Twitch streams, but I haven't seen anything that was truly exceptional or revolutionary. They did release, since the last time we talked, I think, the stats for Githyanki and Githzerai. Matt, did you take a look at those?
I did not.
That's okay. I can tell you about them without looking, because that's our policy here, is not to prepare or do research. They're combat focused. I think they both get innate martial weapons and armor proficiencies of some sort, and they also have I think they also have some innate psionic abilities, so none of this should come as a particularly big surprise. And these were just, I think, either Unearthed Arcana or prelim stats, so we won't know exactly what they are until Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes is released. But as we have consistently predicted since the very beginning, by the way, this is going to be involve some sort of planes traveling, Manual of the Planes type stuff. We'll probably see some, like we talked about, half giants and Githzerai.
Yeah, I've been cracking open. It's just a great read. I love the art, the old second edition Planescape setting books.
Oh yeah,
so I've been looking over those, getting pumped. We might have to talk about those in an upcoming episode. So
we will talk about that in an upcoming episode. Planescape is such a rich and interesting setting.
Speaking of new races, species, so Pathfinder 2nd Edition took a different tack with talking about what you call the species of your character when you pick them. In Dungeons & Dragons, traditionally been called race. In other games, it's species. In Pathfinder 2nd Edition, they're calling it ancestry. 5th Edition has weighed in on this and that, like, we're not going to change it, but if we do, we won't change it to species because that's too sci-fi. Unpack this. What should you call the thing your players pick? Well, doesn't matter.
I really like ancestry. I think that's a good
.com.
Ancestry.com. A good way of not sponsored, by the way. A good way of sidestepping the issue while also making it clear that what we're talking about. I don't know that I agree that species is too sci-fi.
No, it's not.
It's not, and I think that just sort of demonstrates a grognardian adherence to the way things always were. There's nothing that makes species any more or less viable for an elf than race. And
I don't know like why I have to like say this sentence out loud, but if it's like, oh, elves and dwarfs sit down at a coffee table, they recognize they're different species. That would be what they would say.
Right, and also, nerd voice, it's pretty explicitly clear that, certain races, as they are currently known, cannot interbreed. There's no such thing as a half-elf, half-dwarf. Wait, right? I'm right about that?
No, they cannot. They can fuck. They can't procreate.
But they can't procreate, which means they're different species, right? Right?
I guess. I don't know. The definition of species is something let's not get into, but yeah.
Anyway, the point I'm trying to make here is that it's dumb and it doesn't matter, and there's nothing... it's like a non-argument. There's nothing inherently modern or sci-fi about the word species.
Right.
It's just adherence to tradition.
About, species has other meanings like bullion, but it's Latin. Latin is old, right?
Right.
Also, race is just icky. Like,
it is
let's
icky,
not
and
do that.
I'm not gonna go to bat for this. I'm not gonna give 5th edition or any other edition a hard time for continuing to use race. I don't think that it's inherently bad, but I do think that ancestry is significantly better and species is more accurate and less, before the podcast, Matt and I made jokes about, elf phrenology and D&D race science, which is funny, but also, it is,
Well, who would be the phrenologist? It would be elves.
It would be elves. Elves would absolutely be
measuring ear length.
Measuring dwarf skulls to find out, which ones are best to trade with.
Filling them with grains of sand to see how intelligent dwarfs are.
Right. Anyways.
They have an enlarged stone-cutting lobe at the front. That's all they're good
their
at.
Their cranial ridge indicates that they are good for living underground. Anyway, so the point is, species is better than race. I really like ancestry. I think that's a great solution to this particular issue. So, yeah,
I would go with species. Ancestry is weird and makes me think about ancestors. Not a species, but okay. You're entitled to your opinion.
I can see that.
It's a good one.
I do think that if we can get away from race, though, I think that's just sort of generally a good thing. More good than bad, for sure. And if, just like paladins being able to be something other than lawful good, it's just adherence to tradition. There's nothing inherently good about, or more correct or more fantasy appropriate about the word race.
Well, this is why, Robert, Hillary Clinton lost the election, is this obsession over race and ancestry and not talking about class.
That's right.
We were talking about race over class. I feel like, no one thinks about the class argument. No.
I can't believe it's taken us this long to make a race and class joke about Dungeons and Dragons. Something.
And that's when the podcast ended.
Yeah. happened this week?
I was just wondering, man, how's your games going?
Oh, right.
It's
Right,
that summertime, people's schedule getting weird. What's going on?
In Portland, when the weather finally turns, people go just absolutely bonkers and flee into the woods for weeks at a time. And so we try to wrap up around this time. And I have successfully wrapped the second arc of my sweeping Eberron campaign, which has at least one, probably just one more major year-ish arc in it. And it was real touch and go there at the end. My players tend to not do what I expect them to do, so I was worried they were going to dilly-dally and drag out the game until...
And the end of the campaign arc is we finally bought 3 more potions.
That's right. The end
healing.
is you finished haggling with the merchant. So I was worried that we would reach the summertime and people would start leaving for week-long camping trips and we would just never finish. But we sat down and grinded out an epic session with many challenging combats, which they very barely survived. And left on a pretty good cliffhanger, I think, with a mostly satisfying conclusion to what they were dealing with. I think everybody went home happy, which is all what it's all about. So I feel a great deal of relief because the materials I prepared did not last me or did not serve me more than a few months, and so I have been running behind in terms of prep that I would prefer to how prepped I would prefer to be. So I'm really looking forward to spending the summer doing some research and prep so that when I come back fresh in the fall, I'll have a lot of stuff to work with. So all in all, very good. How about you, Matt? Where are you at?
Well, that's a great way to end an arc. So I ran into a similar thing. I had some, players, I needed to take a break, and some players were moving around, so I also wrapped up one of my campaigns. And sometimes the end of an arc can be big and plot moving like yours. Mine also had some big plot weapons. There was big plot points. Players had an epic confrontation with a villain in a giant room with a complete accurate model of the galaxy, so swirling around in an anti-grav room, with tiny stars all about them. But
mine was
one
in
of
my confrontation was in a moving observatory with lots of rings and lenses.
An orrery.
An orrery, that's right, swirling around, and so there were lots of moving platforms. Great set piece for a final battle. Really annoying. Actually,
all final battles should take place in an orrery or a giant map room of some
difficult
kind.
to model on a 2D battle map, but
yeah, whatever.
Otherwise, a great place for your final set piece.
It's a metaphor, right? As they fight on the map,
that's right,
or the model of the planes, it's as if they're fighting for the control of the map of the map,
the galaxy.
That's
itself.
How metaphors work.
Right.
The map is the metaphor. Anyway, so it was a good thing. One of my players was leaving. He knew it was the end of an arc. He is moving out of town the next week. So rather than have one more session, we ended at this final thing. And I, clever dungeon master that I am, I put in a item which was a, fancy magic supercomputer lattice. He is a technomancer, so he's really into messing with stuff. And he played around with it and asked, can I upload my brain to this, galaxy-sized computer? And I said, absolutely. And so that was a fitting end for his character, and the other players, in consultation with him, with his permission, stuck them in their spaceship. So his character is now the name and voice of the player's spaceship. So a fitting way to say goodbye as a player leaves.
This brings me to it. This is an interesting thing to bring up because that was very well planned and clever DM that you are. But it can be interesting to give players, both if they want it and also maybe if they don't, an opportunity to gracefully or organically exit the campaign and either end or rejoin as a different player. There was an NPC with a relationship to one of my existing players who offered her an opportunity to travel the planes with him and there was a great deal of import and significance attached to this particular act. And she decided to stay with the party, but it was a challenging and difficult decision for her to make. And there were lots of compelling reasons either way. And that can be, even if your players might not say, oh, I'm going to leave the party to go, start an inn or whatever. It can be really,
You're just laughing as Robert's house falls apart like a Bluth model home.
Yes, my cat is destroying everything in the background. Anyway.
Oh, okay, there's a cat. I thought your drapes were just like moving on their own.
No, that's Wellington, but also it's hilarious. Anyway,
yeah, so for example, and this is a tip for all dungeon masters everywhere, or for players too, if you want to retire a character or leave a campaign, talk to your dungeon master.
This can be a fun thing to do. If you're not, don't do this too often, but if you're not happy with your character, talk to your DM about how, this can be a really significant plot point or, an important oh, Jesus. give your DM a tool to work with to create drama or create a new NPC or add a little twist to the campaign.
And here's my tips for doing this with your players is, one, you can talk to them beforehand and come up with something that, if they survive the final confrontation, they might want to die heroically in whatever campaign arc, but if they don't, that they can do, or and this is the way I like to do it, is keep it a surprise. So I usually come up with 2 or 3 things that I think might interest the character. So I had the very first thing, which was a magic artifact, Galaxy Brain computer that my player uploaded their consciousness to and then stuck in the ship. I didn't know they were going to do that. If they didn't want to take that, the next thing was going to be a confrontation with one of their NPCs, a general that they used to work for from their homeworld. And then if they didn't leap on either of those, you don't have to kill them off or say they went away. I was going to let them stay around as just a NPC on the ship, but they bit at the first thing and it felt very organic, and the player was very excited that knowing that even though they can't be part of the campaign anymore, their legacy continues on.
Yeah, you should never give your players the expectation that they will die heroically unless they've really earned it and, maybe they're leaving forever, then you can make that happen. But it can feel very forced and it's often hard to execute. I had one player, interestingly, relatively gracefully exit a campaign. It was his first time playing and he had made, something that didn't quite fit for him. And so it was only a few sessions in, so we're going to retire him. But he, for perfectly valid reasons, turned on the party and then was immediately criticaled by a maximized chromatic orb from the sorcerer in the party and turned into dust. I could not have I could not have planned it better myself, to be honest.
And this is why you should let these there's an argument for letting these things happen organically, because if you had come and said, all right, this person turns on you, they're now an NPC and they vanish in the night because you're like, oh, I'm going to use them to torment the party later. That's
which was
fine.
What I had in mind. If
and you can
I was
plan
willing
for
to let
that.
it play out as far as I needed to, but at some point I was just going to say, okay, Fist, the Warforged monk that he was, escapes into the city to plague you later. But instead, this all happened really without any input from me. It all I kept presenting an increasingly difficult situation, and he made his decision, and the party turned on him, and he got disintegrated.
And just dusted him. That is way more. Your players will remember that far longer than another recurring villain.
Exactly. I mean, and again, you can't always plan for these things, and you can't always make it work. But yeah, like Matt said, provide multiple opportunities, try to give lots of chances, and yeah, just work with your players, talk to them about what's going to happen.
Any other advice for how to end a campaign arc? The other thing I like to...
that's a good question. I be flexible, I guess. We always talk about this. I had an entirely different thing in mind for where this campaign arc was going to end, but then certain side quests turned into full quests, and certain things that I didn't intend to take very long ended up taking a long time, and what ended up being the end of this was going to be more like the halfway point, but it was entirely, more than epic and engaging and significant enough. So just like all the advice that we give, just try to be flexible, work with your players, and adapt as the situation comes.
Yeah, I like to think of my arcs as moving. So 4th edition tried to do this with D&D with its different tiers, and these are still informally in the game. But I like to think of this not in mechanics terms, but in narrative terms. A good place to end is when the players move to another tier. And this could not maybe be a move up or to like a broader scale of the world, right? You could say, village to kingdom to continent or something like that. But, it could be a move sideways. It could be a move from one planet to the next one. Or it could be a move down, right? Any change in tier is the end of a campaign, right? Could be we were travelers, and now we found our home where we have to explore this ruined temple. Or the campaign switches from, we're working for this cause to it's about vengeance. It's now moved from a thing to a single person. So just think about when those shifts may happen in your narrative, in what your players create. And when those shifts happen, that's a campaign arc in my book.
I think so too. And I didn't plan it this way, but my first arc was, 1 to 6, and then 6 to 10, and it'll probably be 10 to 14 or 15. So that's pretty close to the informal tiers that Wizards of the Coast have laid out. And it feels, like I said, I didn't plan it that way.
All of these things will pass like tears.
Like tears
in rain.
I didn't plan it that way, but it feels very organic to end things that way. It's just like it's a change in power level and the scope of the campaign. Your players get teleport, and then everything changes.
Right.
But
everything changed when the wizard cast teleport.
Wizard cast teleport, and you can no longer have traveling montages. So yeah. Just think about that when you're thinking about planning campaigns. There's nothing wrong with using those guidelines. It really makes sense to do it that way.
Of giving Space Ghost a talk show in the first place.
How they gave his own show to Tad Ghostal. Any given second he could go mad postal. Stay waving that power band space cannon. And had the nerve to jump in the face. Erase Bannon. Pumped out. Luckily he deaded it. Guess who just smuggled.
I was going to talk about my inspiration homebrew rules, but I think I'll save
I want
them.
to hear about these actually. I happen to think inspiration is okay, not inspiring, as it were, but I think it's a pretty decent mechanic. But I would love to hear what you have to replace it. This is my first time hearing about this, listeners, so I'm excited to hear.
So here's the pitch, and these will be posted along with the episode notes. There's a link in the episode description, and it's on our homebrew page. So those of you not familiar, inspiration is a loosey-goosey mechanic for D&D 5th edition, kind of imported over from a lot of fun storytelling games. Lots of dungeon masters struggle to use it, but inspired by our excellent conversation with Michelle of Serendipity City, talking about Powered by the Apocalypse and playing in a Powered by the Apocalypse game, I realized inspiration, it just needs to be flipped around. That's all you got to do with it. So here's the pitch. You have backgrounds with charts and some ideals, traits, bonds, and flaws. I also made up a few example charts for classes and races and general alignments, and then in some rules for writing your own so that you don't have to draw from these things. Anyway, so from all these bonds, traits, ideals, and flaws that your character has, you pick 3. And so you put a star next to them on your character sheet, or a little dot that you can check off. And instead of getting inspiration from your dungeon master when you do something that the dungeon master approves of, you can spend those 3 points to get advantage on any check when you do something that you can tag that statement, that bond or flaw. So that's the general pitch. Let me give you an example.
I like it. And one of the things I was thinking about when we got done with that conversation as well was that the one thing, and I think I said this on that podcast, the one thing that I would do is I would absolutely just rip the bonds and flaws and relationships bit from Powered by the Apocalypse and put that wholesale or close enough into D&D. I think that's the best part, and that's easy to do. And I like your approach to inspiration. I think it models the way that it works in Powered by the Apocalypse, or at least closely approximates it in a way that really works. No, I think that's a great idea.
This has got to be something the Dungeon Master monitors carefully, and that's negotiated with the players at play, where a player says, I'm going to try and tag this to spend my inspiration. And then once they've tagged that trait, ideal, bond, or flaw, they can't use it again for the remainder of the session, or the Dungeon Master could, if they want to make inspiration more rare, just say, at certain checkpoints in the narrative, I will refresh your inspiration, right? And if you ever accomplish any of these things, this means you get to pick a new one of your things to tag as inspiration. So here's how this might work in practice. You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, so the one open source background, which is the one I go through in the homebrew, is the Acolyte. If you roll on the personality trait table, you roll a 2. You have the statement, I can find common ground between the fiercest enemies, empathizing with them, and always working toward peace. So anytime you can tag that statement in an action, right? Obviously, this might be a persuasion check. But let's say it could also be an attack roll, as you and 2 allies who don't get along are fighting a common foe. And you encourage your players to role play that personality trait out. And when they tag it, they automatically get inspiration on that one check. They can't use it again until you refresh it or the next session or however you set that up. So pretty simple, straightforward, nothing to keep track of really other than check marks on your character sheet.
I think it's great. I think that it makes a lot of sense. And again, this is the benefit of being familiar with or trying to play games in other systems, is that you can get ideas that enrich the D&D experience. And I think this is definitely something that I wish that I had done when I started my homebrew campaign, but I may see if I can institute, especially now that my players are more experienced, when we start up again in the fall. I would absolutely steal this from you, Matt, and make use of it for sure.
Check out the homebrew. There's sections on using it with backgrounds and a quick guide to encourage players to come up with their own statements. And it's just the general advice, like you want to avoid players from being like, my trait is I'm a badass at everything, right? And you also want them to avoid writing traits that I'll murder anyone who insults me,
right,
or something like that. You want to keep them, use the traits and bonds and flaws in the 5e rulebook as a guide.
This is harkening back to something that we talked about in an early episode. This is one of those ways to really codify the idea that your players should all have a reason to be in a party. Right? This sort of mechanism, which unfortunately doesn't exist in D&D naturally, is something where you can be like, hey, you have to have like a bond or motivation or something that explains why you're in a party. And, then using that or adhering to that gets you inspiration at points. It really makes it a lot easier than, what we talked about in session 0, which is just sort of asking your players to do it, which works, but this is better.
The problem with inspiration, how it stands, is there's a disconnect between what you did something cool, here's inspiration, right? And then when you can actually use that inspiration, and players never know when to use it, could be a day later and stuff like that. And
my
this
players
brings
forget about it all the time.
Yeah, they just forget.
Yeah.
So.
I try to give them like a fancy die to remind them, hey, you have inspiration, you roll this die, and they forget every time.
The fancy die didn't even work.
I know.
Well. All right, on that sad note.
I need your sweet inspiration. I need you here on my mind every hour.
Let's do some unwanted advice. What have we got?
All right, unwanted advice. So first off, and thank you to all the people who have written in.
Let's do our follow-up.
Questions.
Yeah, that's right. Sorry. Follow-up music.
We will answer more of your questions on a future episode, so keep sending us emails at dmofnone@gmail.com. But yeah, we have a follow-up from one of our earlier letter writers. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
This is from Gordon, who wrote us a couple episodes ago asking about how do I find players and how do I get started doing D&D. We told him a bunch of useful things, and here is his, you can listen to that episode, it's Mailbag of Holding, and here is his response. Wow, it was awesome to hear my email on your podcast. I took all of your advice. I started talking about D&D with coworkers and found 3 or 4 that either played before or who were interested in playing, and one who would even DM for a session. I talked to my family and found 3 members who were interested. I bribed all with free pizza, soda, and pies. Nice work on the pies. We had our first game. It was generic but awesome. We all had fun and agreed to meet again the following Sunday. Again, offered pizza, soda, and pie. Unfortunately, we had a lot of no-shows, including the Dungeon Master. Not sure what to do, panicked and pissed off. I decided to DM. I had a story that was originally going to be my character's background story, but I used it for the basis of the start of the campaign. I had a limited understanding of the rules, mainly from listening to Critical Role and briefly reading the player's handbook, but now, several weeks later, we have met every Saturday and are having a blast. Thank you for all your advice. A dedicated believer in your podcast and both of your knowledge. And also thanks for withholding my last name, Gordon.
Okay, so I gotta be honest, this is amazing. And I'm so happy, Gordon. I have to admit, I'm very surprised that it worked. Because
I didn't expect our advice to work.
Because our advice was good, but the thing is, this is literally the end boss of Dungeons and Dragons, is getting a group together. This is the hardest thing, even for experienced DMs with lots of friends. So, we gave lots of advice, and I think it was good advice, but, even with all the right tools, sometimes you can't get people together. So I am so happy that Gordon stuck with it and was able to make it work, and that the things that we suggested panned out, because sometimes you literally just can't hold a group together. And
Gordon, your story is there in the pantheon of really Western classics.
I know.
I'm talking Rocky. I'm talking The Mighty Ducks 2. I'm talking The Karate Kid 3. You didn't have a Dungeons and Dragons group. You took our amazing advice, and then now you stumbled into the role of Dungeon Master, and you're having fun, so keep it up.
Yeah, keep it up. Great work, Gordon. And yeah, I hope you guys keep playing and having a good time.
He signs off. Keep rolling them dice.
We're going to roll them dice.
All right, Thanks again, Gordon. All right, now on to the main event. Are you ready for some unwanted advice?
I'm ready for some unwanted advice. Hit me with the questions.
Hit me with the questions.
You gotta put please put in hit me with the best shot here.
Hit me with the questions. All right, I cut some of this out. Do you want to start with like a hard one or like a basic one?
Whatever you want to do, Matt. Let's just throw them at me.
All right. Here's a good practical one. This one's titled "Organizing Your Campaign." I'm having a difficult time sorting through my info of NPCs, towns, relationship, and other things as the campaign grows. Have any good ways of organizing your campaign without spending too much time doing it?
That's interesting. That's a good question, I think. Obviously, it's a good question, but that's sort of interesting to me because I tend to do this more informally. Once I inhabit an NPC, I usually don't have like too much trouble resembling or remembering them or remembering how they link into the campaign, but I also tend to not have like a particularly immense cast. So, I tend to stick to, maybe a half dozen important NPCs for any stage of the campaign. But if you got a particularly far-reaching one and you have a whole cast and crew, then maybe you would want to do something more nuanced than that. And
no, I think that's good advice. 6 NPCs at a time, and you can cycle on to cycle new ones in and out, but no more than 6.
Yeah, and this is a great question because I'm an organized person, and like at work, like I'll have spreadsheets and like flowcharts and lots of notes. And when I was in school, I would have I was in grad school, I would have very, very robust notes. So that's something that I appreciate and something that you should do. I like to have as many notes. I'm a very
meticulous note taker. Something I pride myself on.
This is something I think that you should do, and as robust notes as you can have for your NPCs, the better. But I find that when I'm
keeping it organized,
but I find when I'm actually running a campaign, I tend to just have, for whatever city they're in or whatever stage of the game they're in, just 4 to 6 people that they'll interact with regularly, and then phase them out so that I can sort of make sure to have all those personalities and those characters sorted and how they relate to each other. I don't know, Matt. This is interesting. I'm curious to see what you do.
Here's the best organizing advice that, of course, I only follow maybe 1/3 of the time, which is, we tend to prepare monsters and challenges and plot hooks and things in random hours during the week, but the organizing time, you should do it best right after that campaign session ends. You probably have a page of scribbles or an assorted pile of note cards, and you need to get that into your Dropbox or your Google Doc, or write it down on your nice like moleskin notebook where you keep all the important stuff. And this is advice, like as a student or a teacher, it's always like, oh, organize your notes right after the lecture and review them. And no one ever does that, right? And that's my experience. It's the best way, but I can only remember to do it 1 out of every 3 sessions. So taking 5 minutes after the game to organize your notes and be like, these were the things that were important. These are what the things the players want to work on next. This was the new relationship established. That kind of stuff.
I would say that especially, I think the question specifically asked about NPCs, that if you really want to get over prepared and advanced about this, then create a relationship web, right? Put each a picture or a little description of every NPC, and then draw a link to however they relate or don't relate to the rest of the NPCs in your campaign, and map it all out. If you really, really want to make sure that when your players ask, does Marbolg the trader know, Elysia the tavern madam, then you can refer to
certainly not. He's a traitor.
I know, yeah.
Traitor!
You can refer to your chart, but generally, anything you do is better than nothing, to be honest. Any sort of organization is good as long as you're not over preparing and becoming mired in your own abundance of notes. That's just as bad as having nothing.
Here's the thing that I think Robert said that is really good is have one master page of a web of NPC relationships, or just a list of the main NPCs that are important right now, a list of the main plot hooks all on one page, a list of the main places all on one page, and they could be webbed or mapped out or what have you. And then the rest of your notes are just details, and just having those 3 or 4 big picture pages right there will keep you organized, and you only have to look up the details when you need them.
Right.
That's what I do. I mean,
yeah. Again, with most organization, I love to have notes, and I love to have charts, and I love to have even spreadsheets sometimes, but having too many of those, you want to be, like I said before, you want to be flexible with Dungeons & Dragons, because your players are going to do things that you don't expect, and you want to be able to adapt. So I try to, like we talked about, prepare situations and NPCs and monsters and places that can be slotted in as needed, rather than a robust set of something more concrete.
All right, I deem this problem solved. Okay, are you ready for some fun ones? Are you ready to go down?
Sorry about that random dog. I don't know where he's coming from, and I can't stop him from barking. Sorry.
That's okay. He's a good doggo.
He is a good doggo.
All right, we're going to a dark place here, the darkest place on all of role playing internet.
Oh no, this isn't. All right, I'm ready.
I think Robert knows where we're going.
I know where we're going with this.
Player wants to play a shape-shifting wizard in 5th edition. Hey all, brand new DM and fairly new player I have here. In the process of starting things up, I've done a session 1, session 0, but unfortunately we'll have to do another because half the group couldn't be there. Should have listened to our episode. I've got one person who has used an online generator to come up with ideas for their character and really likes the idea of playing a shape-shifting wizard. I told them that wasn't a thing in 5th edition, as far as I know, but I discovered a homebrew for them to use. I've discovered a playable doppelganger race or species, on DnDWiki. Now, my problem is I've heard most homebrew stuff on this site is OP. Is that true? What do you think of this race?
What does the question include the race?
Yes, it does. I've looked over it. But let's
let's pretend like we don't know what it says.
Let's pretend like we don't know what it says for the first part of the question. Player says they want to play Shapeshifter Wizard, and you're like, I don't know how to do that in 5th edition. What do you do?
Well, this is a good question. So if it were me, and this is just what I would do, I would work with the player to create a shape-shifting either subclass or race that would allow them to play the character that they want. And for me, I can immediately see how this would work because I have a changeling in my Eberron game, and there are stats for changelings in one of the Unearthed Arcanas for Eberron, which is, and it's relatively well balanced and it's easy to work with, but not everybody is going to immediately know that off the top of their head. But if you're comfortable with it, I would say go ahead and find a way to homebrew something or adapt something that already exists to suit your needs. I would be wary of just picking up something off of DnDWiki and using it wholesale, though, however.
I would be too. When a player comes to you and says, I want to be X, I want to be a mecha pilot or something like that, and you're like, well, I don't know if that fits in your game, just always ask them, why do you want to be a mecha pilot? Why do you want to be a shapeshifter, right? And figure out what it is, and if that need or want can be solved in another way, then that might be your solution. The player says shape-shifting wizard, right? Maybe they want to be a wizard who's good at shape-shifting spells and say, hey, you should be the transmuter class, and your first level spell should be disguise person, and your next level spell should be alter self, right?
Right.
Maybe it doesn't have to be.
Or maybe they just really want to be a druid and they just don't know what druids can do. So yeah,
there's a whole class that is good at this in Dungeons and Dragons, and it's a druid.
Like most Session 0 and character creation questions, that may cause problems. The real key here is to talk to your players.
Talk to your players, figure out why they want that, make sure they know all the options. And then if none of those fit, explore homebrews. How do you tell if something's overpowered? It's usually not that hard in 5th edition. Compare it to the things that are in your book. If the thing in the DnDWiki has something that none of the other races can do and it seems really powerful, then maybe you should be wary of that. Want to make a shapeshifter? Disguise Self is a first level spell. Tieflings get a first level spell when they reach 3rd level. So, giving them a first level spell when they get 3rd level is not that big of a deal. You could give them something like that. You could probably even give it to them earlier, as the Changeling class shows. So, just compare things to other things to see if they're overpowered or not. That's the basic approach.
Put things side by side. You don't have to have, intense knowledge to be able to compare numbers or compare abilities. Just grab any sub-race from any existing race and compare it to the homebrew and see if the homebrew gets like a lot more or significantly more powerful. And, you can usually tell.
All right. Are you ready to go to the dark place of DnDWiki and look at this doppelganger 5e race?
Yeah.
Are you looking at it as well, or do you want me to read it?
No, read it off to me. Read it off to me. I want to be surprised.
So they get +2 charisma, +1 intelligence. All right, that's pretty straightforward. All the other things are pretty normal. Shape changer. You can use your action to polymorph into a humanoid of small or medium size, then back to your true form. It doesn't change your statistics, but it can change the equipment. Can't be changed. When you die, you return to your true form. So that's a pretty powerful ability. That's at will, better than disguise self.
Should
it's
probably
not an
be
illusion, right?
So should probably be per short rest or long rest to be balanced. But go on.
I would make it short rest or long rest, or make it an illusion, right? So that if people mess around with your form, they can tell you're doing.
See, and now this runs into the issue that canonically doppelgangers can do it whenever, and so that runs into an issue with making doppelgangers a race. So you might want to make it well, for example,
half
doppelganger or changeling or doppelganger kin, something like that, so that they have that ability, but you can explain why they can't do it at will, and just say, hey, you can't play doppelganger. That's a monstrous race.
The traits we've gone over far are probably enough for a race, since Shape Changer is good. But wait, there's more. Read thoughts, which is a thing doppelgangers can do, but as a playable race, you basically can read the thoughts of creatures within 60 feet, one at a time. The target can make a save if it suspects your true nature. It gets a bonus on the save. Yes, you can basically read thoughts of anything, anytime, anywhere within 60 feet, unless there's it's only blocked by walls of 3 feet of wood or dirt. So you can even read people's thoughts through a small wooden door.
Again, canonically something that doppelgangers can do, and now we are running into explanations for why traditionally in Dungeons and Dragons you can't play monstrous races, because you run into in the last time you were able to do stuff like this, if you're not familiar, listeners, was in 3.5, and there was usually something called a level adjustment. So if you wanted to play
the Savage Species book,
if you wanted to play an ogre, you could play an ogre, but you would not gain a class level until level, I don't know, like for an ogre it'd be like 4 or 5 or something. And this was a inferior but somewhat balanced way of making it possible for players to play monstrous races. But since those rules don't exist in 5th edition, if you just give a player all the abilities of, say, a doppelganger or a werewolf or a vampire, for example, which are things that players are going to want to do, you may run into problems.
Yeah. And see, there are two kinds of like balancing you have to be aware of with homebrew, right? There's the kind of like mechanical balance. Like if you made a playable race or species that got +2 strength, +2 charisma, +1 wisdom, you compare that to the other races and you're like, wow, that's a lot more ability points than every race that normally gets pluses like that. That's probably overpowered. And there are things like this mind reading thing where you can read thoughts at will of anyone at any time within 60 feet. This ruins campaigns, because if you ever want an NPC to know something that players don't know, or you want to make players, have an adventure to figure out a thing, this solves all of those problems. And now I know you're saying, hey, wizards can get detect thoughts, but yeah, it's like a 3rd level spell, and they have to choose to prepare it and choose to suspend it, and then you reward them for that. So you got to think, is this going to mess up my game, right? If this level 1 player can fly because their race has wings, does this mess up some basic balance of what I want to do? So they also get immune to the charm condition.
Oh no, is there more? Jesus, there's more.
Proficiency in either insight or deception, and 2 other languages of their choice.
Oh, right. Well, okay. So not great. Again, the person in D&D Wiki clearly modeled the doppelganger off of the real monster doppelganger,
right.
Which, cool, I guess, but there's a great reason why those are not a playable character race. So lesson learned, don't let your player be a doppelganger, but there are other options.
I have another question about custom races. This one about turtles. I think I'll skip that one for
great.
now.
Save that one. Are we going to have a conversation about Planescape or something like that soon, where we can talk about, or Spelljammer, where we can talk about turtles? All right,
we'll talk about turtles.
Keep that in your pocket. I want to talk about turtles. Hit me with one more good one before we sign off.
All right, let's see. I got 3 to choose from. Let me decide if I have to just pick one, which one's going to be. All right, here, I'll let you choose from the titles.
Ooh, I like this.
How to Create Freedom.
Okay. Give me the other 2 because I really want to pick that one.
Too Harsh or Just Realistic?
Oh, this is hard.
And then a very practical one. Roll20 online game players. Do you show the hit point values to your players?
Oh, well, that one sucks.
Yes, but only the bar, not the actual number.
Yeah, I agree with Matt on
I
that
saw
last
that
one.
one.
Yeah, just show them the bar, don't show them the actual number. Let's go with how do you create freedom? I want to talk
All right,
about.
so Robert, you are forever turning your back, putting it into the Dungeon Master of None vault on too harsh or just realistic.
No, I want to bring that back because I want to know what that one's
all
about.
right, let's go in the vault. Let's go in the
vault.
Disney fucking vault.
All right.
All right, okay. Here's the question. How to create freedom. This sounds like that Andy Daly show review, like a question he would get. Always aching. How do I review? Yeah, okay.
All right. How do we create freedom, Matt?
Okay. All right. How to create freedom. I'm a new DM and I'm writing my first campaign. The premise of the story is, the party witnesses a murder over powerful artifacts. After escaping, the leader of the group sends enemies to attack the party to kill witnesses. Party has to figure out who the killer is while fending off his powerful henchmen. How can I give the party freedom as to how to solve the murder? And how can I plan ahead for different locations they may make or locations they can look without making it seem linear?
This is such a weird question because
less philosophical than you were hoping.
Well, yeah, it's and less philosophical than I was hoping. Yes, I was really hoping for something really deep. But this is such a
true
weird question.
Freedom only comes from the right to own personal property.
Yeah, that's right. The only way to be truly free is to own your own land. Everybody knows that. Anyone who tells you otherwise is selling something. Anyway,
what if they're selling land?
What's funny about this is that the situation that the DM has described is incredibly freeing. You have the players have to solve a murder, and they're under the gun. They've got people coming after them, but the method to doing it is entirely open-ended. They can approach it literally any way they want. So really, the way to create freedom is to just sort of set up these encounters with these powerful henchmen, and then let your players explore and choose how they want to try to solve this mystery. And then at appropriate points, have them be attacked by the henchmen to add tension or create difficulty or to move the plot along. I think that the way that this is I like the idea for this campaign a lot. It's very, in my opinion, open-ended and freeing.
Two things I would say that this Dungeon Master should look out for that could impinge upon the party's freedom in this open-ended murder case. Starts off, the party witnesses a murder over powerful artifacts. After escaping, the leader of the group sends enemies to attack the party to kill the witnesses. It sounds like you want to make sure that the party witnesses a murder, but you want to make sure that from the beginning they have the freedom to interact, to try and track down a person who did that murder, to run after them and have an exciting chase scene. So you want to make the person doing the initial murder not this big boss. The second thing is freedom's useless unless players they have to have some inkling of what to do. Otherwise, you'll have to lead them on. It will become linear. So at the murder scene, they catch the killer. You need to leave a million different clues about what they can explore, right?
I agree with Matt here. The key
There's got to be 7.5 clues.
The key to this is you can create so much freedom, but you have to seed so many clues so that no matter what the players do, if they decide to investigate, if they decide to do survival and track footprints or whatever they decide to do, they have somewhere to go. But if you prepare enough clues, enough and some red herrings and some actual leads, then the players can really address this any way they like.
So they're trying to keep the murderers from getting the rod of 7 parts, and one of the ways that they could stop that is going to the location where one of the parts are held and laying a trap for the henchman that is coming to get it. But they're never going to be able to do that unless you give them a clue that they can discover the artifact that the fight is happening over is the Rod of 7 Parts. And one of the parts is in the High Temple of Palor in the middle of the city, right? You got to give them those clues so that they can be like, oh, hey, one of the artifacts are there. We could go lay a trap. And you got to give them a million other clues so they can track down the henchmen, try and solve the crime. So give them many options.
What we're saying here is the way to create freedom is to give choice. But remember, it's the illusion of choice because freedom is not real. Because we are all locked into our pathways, and that there is no true choice. We are all just slaves to our own randomly firing neurons, and nothing we do there's no such thing as free will, and freedom is an illusion. But
so
if you want to create that illusion, this is how you do that.
I'm not sure, if I'm more disturbed of that sort of thought, or the thought that a random chaotic universe creates a Dungeons and Dragons podcast.
That's actually what I've always thought.
Surely there is meaning here,
there's a chaotic
Robert.
universe. That's a really shitty chaotic universe for creating something with as weird a structure as this.
The material plane is unaligned, Robert. It's not a chaotic universe. You're thinking of Limbo.
That's right. This is true neutral or whatever, or not aligned. Right.
Well.
All right, players.
How to create freedom.
Yeah, we answered the question. Freedom now exists
Freedom
for everyone.
isn't free. It costs 5 gold piece.
Well, thanks for listening, everybody. If you have questions for us that you actually want us to answer, feel free to add us at Twitter at DMofNone or email us at dmofnone@gmail.com. And stay tuned for pretty soon a Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes review, but probably one before then.
A Planescape, maybe.
Planescape. We're hoping to do more world building.
Entering the city of Sigil, me slowly chanting, Planescape, Planescape, Planescape. Other Burks in the cage chanting, Planescape, Planescape. The Lady of Blades herself, Planescape, Planescape.
All right, anyway.
All right, that's a tweet reference.
That's a tweet reference. It's the best tweet ever written, in my opinion. Anyway, if you're not online, you should be more online. You'll get more of our jokes. But we will see you all next week, everybody. Thank you for listening. I'm Rob, and over and out.
All right. Bye-bye. Bye, Wellington.
Bye, Wellington.